So when did the outdoor bug hit you? Like, how old were you and what happened? Did you have an experience when that happened? When
I was
suddenly,
basically,
when suddenly you were outdoors and you get to stay there and not have an office job, you know?
okay, you mean in my adult life?
When was the first time? When you were a kid, or when did it
Yeah,
happen? Yeah, okay.
yeah, basically. My family was big on traveling, camping, going across the country, all that sort of stuff. And we stayed in a lot of national forests and campgrounds. And I happened to have had the opportunity to go to a lot of summer camps when I was in my early teens. And they were outside, or it was outside of Kings Canyon National Park. So I had tremendous exposure to the southern central Sierra and just fell in love on some of the summer camps backpacking trips on the western side of Kings Canyon National Park. And it was then that I knew that I had to do more of this, and got hooked into the Pacific Crest Trail when Eric Ryback wrote his book, High Adventure of Eric Ryback. I've probably got it right here. I don't know if you've got it.
No, I had Cindy Ross. I think I did read that. Yeah, but I don't have it.
Well, this goes back to, what is it, 1970?
Yeah.
That's when he did his thing. Yeah.
I started with Cindy Ross and that Australian fellow. I forgot his name. Those two books were outstanding. And you're lucky because it took me till 2014 really to get into it. I finally had a chance to do it with my son in 2014, the PCT, and from then on I was hooked. Yeah. So
how far'd you go?
I went the whole way, PCT.
In 14?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was up there teaching that year too.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, up between Kennedy Meadows South and Kearsarge Pass.
Aha. Okay. Did you have a
in
group?
May.
How does that work? I mean, you bring a group up there?
Yep, it was all through my wilderness school, Mountain Education, which I started in 1982. And we, at that time, I think I ended it when I started working for FEMA in 17. they didn't quite go well together because I get deployed and I go all over the country. But anyway, we used to take groups up to about 10 or 12 people, mainly Pacific Crest Trail through hikers, connect with them in Kennedy Meadows South or Cottonwood past Chicken Spring Lake and go north over Forester, which is their first contact with snow. And I'd be teaching them how to navigate when you can't see a trail, over snow, how to deal with steep snow, frozen lakes, frozen creeks, all that kind of stuff. And then we'd end about a week later going over Kearsarge.
Wow, that's so much needed for people like me who just put on a backpack and start going. We had no experience whatsoever. Are you still Are you still, you and your wife Julie and Matt, are you still doing this regularly then?
Actually, no. After 2017, when I started working for FEMA doing national disaster recovery, we couldn't teach the classes anymore and have had to sort of reorganize the school into something that's more of a website-based information source for safe wilderness use. So it's sort of my next step toward writing this book that I've been wanting to do since 1974, and haven't had enough time to finish doing it.
What will the book be about? Excuse the dog in the background.
Do you remember? Well, you might not, but I'll show you. Once upon a time, there was this guy, Colin Fletcher, and he wrote something called The Complete Walker. And it was all about, how to do it, why you do such a thing as long distance hiking, how to pull it off, and a lot about the equipment stuff. My desire is to kind of follow that pattern, but mainly to talk about The safety aspects. I was a paramedic for 8 years. I used to teach an EMT class for 8 or 9 years in South Lake Tahoe, a search and rescue member for quite a few years, currently also down in Southern California, where I am right at the moment. And so I'm very concerned with hiker safety and their appreciation of where they are, their awareness of where they are and what's going on around them. And if they're not, then they get in trouble. So the book would be largely about the highs and lows as far as safety and enjoyment of the wilderness backcountry, whether mountain or desert or whatever, but focused on the PCT experience.
Weren't there 2 gals that lost their lives recently on the PCT this year? Did I hear?
I don't know about this year. There were 2 who died trying to cross the South Fork of the Kings River a few years back. And this year we've had, this year we've had the most number of injuries and fatalities on the Pacific Crest Trail of any year since 1974 that I can think of. It's just crazy what's going on this year, and I haven't really been able to put my finger on the reasons, except that a lot of people endeavor to do it without sufficient research and planning, and they just go. Of course, it wasn't Reese Witherspoon, that was just the actress, but Cheryl Strayed in the movie Wild, sort of really catapulted the numbers of people trying to do the trail. When the book came out, it tripled, and when the movie came out, it tripled again. And this was seen in the attendance alone, not to mention the PCT permits that were pulled. At something was called the Annual Day Zero PCT Kickoff. This is a weekend event down near the Mexican border. And back in 2005, there were about 300 people. It started in the late 90s with about 10. And after the book came out, that 300 went to about 1,000, I guess. And then when the movie came out, that went over 3,000. And I believe the campground couldn't handle that many. And they kind of had gotten too big for their britches. And so they had to disband and regroup and never started back up. But the popularity has gotten so enormous in numbers that I think there are a lot of people who simply don't know what's involved. Some die from hyperthermia even before they get to the second night out. Some, or a great many, go home for a variety of reasons in the first month. So actually, to tell you, the last thing I'll say on that is the completion percentage is still at about 25 to 30%, which was the same thing back in the early 70s. It's no better with the ultralight and all this other stuff. I blame it on planning. People just aren't aware of what's going on and don't know how to plan for it.
Yeah, well, I certainly wasn't. We did 5 days of backpacking. That's the first I'd ever done in my life before the trip. And unfortunately, it was a slow snow year, and it worked out. We didn't get that much rain, and the snow wasn't that bad. The first snow was just after Forester Pass on the north side, really. Mm-hmm. And we had, as far as I know, 2 fatalities. Is one. The first day or second day, a hiker had been partying before, and he was died of dehydration. He was on some kind of drug, and he didn't bring enough water, and it was hot. And then in Oregon, somebody got caught in a flash flood. So these things happen, and I'm glad you're out there doing this. It's really necessary, to do this. How did you get your interest in the safety aspect of it? Have you been injured, or had you had trouble with that yourself?
No. I got interested after my dad died, and then I did my hike in '74. He died in '69. I began being interested while I was at UC Davis in kinesiology and the dynamics of human movement, and then took an EMT class, and then that did it. And then I started working in my local town, was frustrated with the EMT level, so became a paramedic at Stanford in '81, and just things went on from there. Eventually, I became a Knowles Wilderness EMT and the search and rescue stuff. I worked for the U.S. Forest Service in Sierra National Forest, which you walked through from the tip of Kings Canyon National Park north to Mono Creek was largely my area, and worked up there during the summers as a wilderness ranger, and was involved in many helivacs and medical rescues and things like that. And it was just always kind of fun for me to do.
I grew up in Palo Alto, old Stanford
Ah,
there. Yeah.
I grew up in Atherton.
Oh yeah, okay. So
I went to Encinal School, and I was going to be going to Menlo Atherton High School when my parents moved to Sonoma.
what year did you graduate? High
70.
school.
Well, it would have been 74, but I had to graduate early to do the PCT hike.
Okay. I'm a graduate in 68 from
Yes.
Palo Alto High School.
Yep.
Then I went to Foothill for 2 years, San Jose State, got a
Awesome.
teaching credential. Now, academic-wise, I'm at Grand Canyon University doing some master's work and online. But
Sweet.
my primary interest is just I'm positioning myself now for the outdoors, hiking and helping to reach people that way to help them become more aware, basically, through that means, whatever it is that they want to become more aware of. But it's a great tool to use because it's about survival. I mean, instead of ideas and things you may have about life, it gets down to really survival, and how to take care of yourself. And that's where you come in. That's so cool what you're doing,
Well, thanks.
What are some of do you have any dramatic stories, the rescue stories that you have? Like you must have a lot.
Well, I got quite a few, but actually the one thing I would probably like to describe was, in 74, I was 17. And although I had been hiking since 1964, so I've been hiking for a few years. I took a snow class from the Sierra Club the winter before, so the winter of 73 going into 74, and I figured I better know about snow, and so I did. And they just taught like how to walk on snow and how to make a snow cave and the things to watch out for, like cornices and falling into lakes and creeks and things like that. But when I went through the Sierra on my hike itself, I was going past Whitney in late April. Once there's any kind of snow on the ground, it doesn't matter. You walk on top of it. It could be 20 feet thick or 2 inches thick. It's still the same, but you don't really try and follow the trail. You try to parallel it wherever it's safest for you to go. To try and follow switchbacks down that are buried in snow might end up killing you because it's very steep where switchbacks are. And if it's all buried in snow, any fall is going to tumble you right into a tree or a boulder or a creek or a lake or whatever is below you. So you don't go right where the summer trail goes. You make your own routes over snow. And so I was doing that, leaving Crabtree Meadows or Whitney Creek and Crabtree Meadows and going north, hit Bighorn Plateau on my way to Forester Pass, crossing Wrights Creek and Wallace Creek, and then you hit Bighorn. And for some reason, I didn't realize that the route I should be taking dropped in elevation going to Tyndall Creek. And I stayed level in elevation and started contouring around the west side of something called Tawny Point, which is this little knob right above Bighorn Plateau. Unfortunately, it got steeper and steeper and steeper and icier and icier. And eventually I couldn't move. And I wasn't alone. I had a partner and he was behind me, and it was like, holy crap, what do we do now? And I was 17, didn't know what to do. And all we could think of was to get to some rocks. There was a few rock bands and snowshoes going down the mountain to what we call the frog ponds down below. And if we could get onto these rock bands and go straight down them, we could get down to the bottom where those lakes were. And that's what we did, but we had to lower our packs with ropes and we had to be careful, and it was really crazy. And it was like, how do you say, the shit hits the fan sometimes if you're not paying attention. And, you learn a little wisdom through your mistakes, hopefully. And so that was a pretty important one because I carry that lesson to this day and try and teach my students to distrust exposed rock, because it wobbles and slides and all kinds of stuff in the Sierra. It's not exactly the most stable, especially if you're on a steep slope. So don't think you're going to be climbing the rocks to get up to Mather Pass or wherever you want to go. It's better just to stay on the snow. It's predictable, and you can cut footholds and handholds and ice axe anchors and all that kind of junk. So that was probably one of my craziest things outside of hitting a bear with my hand. But that's another story. But
did he strike back? Crazy. Did he hit you back, or?
It was pitch black. It was the middle of the night. I was laying out cowboy camping at the base of a tree. My pack was right behind my head, and I woke up sensing that there was something right next to my shoulder. And I was in a mummy bag, and it was, you know, I had about a half a dozen bear encounters that summer. That was 74. I had gotten to Canada. I decided to come back to Tuolumne Meadows to hike the John Muir Trail south and see what it actually looked like without snow. And so I was in the park campground right there. And of course, that's notorious for bears. You know, wherever there's people, there's food, there's bears. So I sensed he was there. I opened up the mummy bag a little bit and propped myself up on one elbow and came around with my hand and just swung into the darkness, half awake. And when my hand sunk into a good 6 inches of fur, I woke up and just started yelling at my partner and just yelling in general. And I would not have seen, I never saw him. I just felt him. And if he wanted to strike back, I'm sure we were nose to nose, but I didn't even know it. It was too dark. But that was an exciting experience.
My son kind of had similar, I don't remember where it was, but we were with a group of people, and there's a lot of bear scat where we camped, but it was a nice campground, so we took a chance. In the middle of the night, you know, he actually felt his breath, the bear's breath. He was in a sleeping bag, and he didn't want to. He just kept his covers over his sleeping, you know, his covers over himself.
Wow.
Nothing happened, but he could feel the breath, the bear's breath. We didn't have any bear canisters or anything like that, but everybody was okay at the end of the day. That's a close call.
Yeah.
So how about case 74? I mean, the trail wasn't even actually official yet. I mean, how was it? There were no trail angels or anything, probably, hardly, if any.
Oh no, there was nothing. There were no trail angels. There was no really awareness.
Was there a trail?
Matter of fact, in Southern California, they had some new signs for the PCT, but largely it followed sporadically something called the California Riding and Hiking Trail. And wherever because that was only in sections through certain communities. And the idea was to use, until it could create the trail, to use existing routes. Now, a route was, like I said, a highway, an asphalt road, like going through Wrightwood, you know, a horse trail or whatever. And so that's what we did. We just linked things up at somebody else's suggestion. I think I've got that for California. The trail guidebook I used in 74 was this one, but just to show you the difference, see, they had an Oregon version, right? Now this was the one that this is the one that I hiked with, and you can see it's duct taped in the corners, and I got a sticker from Mount Hood on there and all that kind of junk. But that's all we had, and the maps in it were simply little black and white things with very little topography and a red line showing where the route was. And a lot of times it was a proposed route. So you didn't have assistance. You didn't have anybody out there providing water or food. A lot of people simply didn't know anything about the trail. And my year, there were about 20 people who finished. Up to the end of my year, before my year, there were probably about 20. So I was in the beginning of the year, so I was like number 21 or whatever. And everybody else finished after me because I started March 14th. I wanted to make sure that I got to Canada before the rangers in Manning Provincial Park said the snow would arrive and I would get buried. And they said that would be anytime after mid-September. And pretty much that's held as a target date, with the exception of a little bit of climate change or whatever it is that's causing some winter seasons to not start until, say, October 1st or later.
So you were one of the first. So what other challenges did you have? How about water in the desert and all that? I mean, water, did you have to purify water in those days before people, the things got so polluted and poisoned, the streams? And was water more pure?
I didn't have any problems finding water, even following four-wheel drive roads and junk through Southern California. Or Northern California. Both areas of the state really didn't have a trail. Purifying, in those days, all we had was iodine tablets to treat the water. They made it taste terrible, so I didn't like using them. Never got Giardia on that trip. I have had it once or twice while I was in various places, but you know what? I started so early, there was abundant water, and it was a pretty heavy winter. So there was water in pretty much all the creeks.
How long did it take you, the whole trail?
The whole thing was five and a half months.
Yeah, good. That's excellent. Yeah. And you had, did you do this supply on the trail, or did you, there's nothing like mail ahead or supplies? You just supply on trail, right?
Yeah, good questions. Well, every time I had a chance to cross a highway where somebody could drive a box out to me, and if I knew someone living in San Diego or LA or Sacramento or Seattle, whatever, I would contact them, send them a box, and tell them exactly when I would be, say, on Snoqualmie Pass. The problem was we didn't have communication, so the 2 weeks of supply of food prior to Snoqualmie Pass, which would be what, the Columbia River, Cascade Locks area, I'd have to get into a pay phone booth in downtown Cascade Locks and call the guy who was going to drive my box out to Snoqualmie Pass and say, hey, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be there at 5 o'clock. You know, hang around for a couple hours. So I would have to shoot for a 2-hour window over the course of hiking for 2 weeks to make sure I got there. So that's kind of how some of those worked. I mailed boxes to ranger stations, ski resorts, summer fishing resorts, you know, stuff like that where I could. But we didn't have any published stuff that said, you know, these are the places you can mail to. These are the post office boxes along the route that'll take general delivery or whatever. There was nothing there. So it took me 3 years to plan this trip.
So payphones was your primary source of, okay. No cell phones in those days.
Nothing.
I just started with a hard map myself. I'm not that techie. And then my son left the trail in Northern California. I picked up Handbrake, and he had a cell phone and GPS, and the rest of the way we used that. But those days, you were really primitive there. You were like a scout, you know. And then I did at the libraries, I would use their computer and do trail updates. I did about 12 of those for people home, make sure, you know, they knew what was going on. Did you do anything like that too? Your family or anything? Any kind of call, at least a phone call or something? Yeah,
you do the phone calls at resupplies. I tried to stay out of towns as much as I could, so everything was kind of rural resorts and stuff like that. Maybe they had a phone booth, you know, like a Lolly Lake resort, you know, might have had a phone booth somewhere. So, you know, I used that, but that was the only communications for 5.5 months was periodic phone calls. My mom got scared to death one time, and when I was in southern Washington, because I decided out of Trout Lake to do a little day hike up Mount Adams. And so we checked in with the ranger station, got the climbing permit, whatever, and, you know, headed over to the mountain. got ready to do that thing and went up the mountain, came back down, and the ranger station said, you know, when they gave us the permit, they said, oh no, don't come back here, you're going north. So there's another ranger station on the north side of Mount Adams. It's called Midway Guard Station. So you can check out with staff there, you know, let us know that you made it off the mountain safe. And so we figured, what the heck, started heading around the west side of the mountain, going toward the north side of the mountain, got up to Midway Guard Station, and it's still under 2 feet of snow, locked up tighter than a drum, and there's nothing we could do about it. There was nobody around. And so we headed on through Goat Rocks and got up to what is it, Stevens Pass? White's Pass. And I walked into the campground there on White's Pass because there was only the campground, the ski resort, and a gas station. I put my pack down at a picnic table on the campground, and a tow truck pulls up behind me. And the guy leans out the driver's window and he goes like, hey, buddy, are you hiking the Pacific Crest Trail? And I said, yeah. And he goes, hey, jump in. The sheriff wants to talk to you. And so, I mean, what are you going to do? So he took me up to the gas station where the lady running the gas station, let me use the phone. And of course, the tow truck driver calls the guy and says, yeah, I found the guy and here he is, and gave me the phone. And the sheriff was the nicest guy. He says, man, how was your climb up the mountain? And you guys are doing great. That's wonderful to hear. It's been like 10 days since I was supposed to have checked out or whatever, a week anyway. And he said, oh, yeah, by the way, you know, I'm just concerned because we had a search party out for you because you didn't check in. And so we had a couple helicopters and ground parties and all this kind of stuff. And we called your mom at 2 a.m. and let her know that you're missing and all this stuff. So I got written up in the Spokane newspaper, you know, a couple hikers doing the PCT from Sonoma, California are lost and missing and, you know, whatever. But that was another little ordeal.
I'm glad that turned out okay. Yeah, these things happen. I'm glad sheriffs, you know, I'm part of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and we're promoting, like, you know, sheriffs being like helping people basically. Well, first of all, Constitution, being constitutional, but, you know, a service, serve and protect, and that we've kind of lost that. So I'm glad to hear sheriff somewhere helping people, you know. I mean, that's basic, but instead of beating them up, actually assisting them, you know. You know, what I wanted to get to is your family and how you raised your kids. Did you take them on a lot of hikes, or how did you go about teaching about outdoors? Like Matt is more outdoorsy, right? The other one, according to your website, is not so much, or? Well,
actually, it's the other way around.
Oh, okay, okay.
But to get to your first question, let's see. I started mountain education as a wilderness school in '82. Come about 92, you know, we had young kids, and mountain education's classes were starting to become known, and we started running trips into the Echo Summit, South Lake Tahoe, Desolation Wilderness area for 3-day weekends, teaching snow camping, snow navigation, snow safety, all that sort of stuff. And so the kids always came, and so did the family dog, and we did this quite a bit. So for their first 15 years of life, I would say, we were always running trips and everybody went. It wasn't till toward the, 2000, whatever, the kids started saying, nah, I think I'll pass. And my younger son, he was more interested in backpacking. And so he did the John Muir Trail in 2008, something like that. But anyway, he did some stuff on his own for 3 weeks, did that, and has, moved on. He's not doing a whole lot of it now, I don't think. But and Matt's gone into business and stuff like that. So,
okay. So they got
a question in there. I lost that one.
I mean, kind of answered it. I mean, being exposed so much, you're going to pick things up. And do they still have a love for it like you do, or an appreciation for it?
I believe so. They're busy in what in their own lives. And so I don't see them, they're not going to say, hey dad, can you help me out with a plan for a trip or whatever. But I'm sure the interest is still there. Certainly, when you raise your kids to love and appreciate the wilderness. And mainly what we did wasn't so much summer, it was all winter. It doesn't leave them. So I do think the appreciation and love of it is still there.
Have you seen changes in the water quality, air quality, trees dying or living? What's that been like since the 70s and compared to now, nature itself?
Yeah, actually, I would say I'm not so sure what the causes are, but I remember early on we started to see effects on the pines in the Tahoe area, because I lived in Tahoe for a number of years. Needles dying. We thought it was smog. Then it was the bark beetle started killing trees, and we had lots of problems there. Water-wise, whenever I got close to places where there were a lot of people, like Echo Lake, Echo Summit, with cabins around the lake, whatever, it got to the point where you didn't drink the water out of the lake. You had to treat it or filter it, as filters became lighter and better built. As far as, let's see, so that would be air, water.
How about fires? Were there so many fires in the past as there are now? I don't
No,
remember that.
no, I don't remember it either.
Or as
Winters were
devastating,
heavier.
or as devastating as they are now.
No,
Yeah.
no, right. Yeah, too many drought winters.
Yeah, it's too bad. Some of these areas you walk, it's like a ghost. It's like eerie, walking through some of these burnt areas. Nothing's even growing. No pioneer species are even coming up. It was so hot. The fire was so hot.
Yeah.
It take a
Yeah.
while to recover.
Yeah.
I'm saying I like the stuff that Luther Standing Bear puts out. Are you familiar with him?
Not really.
Yeah, he was a Sioux Indian who was one of the first kids to go to the Pine Ridge School in Pennsylvania. When the white man came, they took the Indian kids to indoctrinate them into the white society, to cut their hair, put clothes on them. And he was one of the first. His father actually volunteered him to do that because his father was looking ahead, seeing that maybe he could, kind of learn the white man ways and then come back and kind of be in between the white and the Indian ways. And he was actually, he eventually became an actor and an advocate for the Indians in Washington, etc., because he knew how the white men were. He got the taste of that, but he was able to view the Indians' attitudes and needs, with the white men, because he went to the school, the white man's school. So he has he has 4 books out, and he talks about how children were raised and just stuff you don't see on the Indians on TV, and he was the real Indian.
Yeah.
So you get a viewpoint that you don't usually. And the further we move away from that history, the further distorted it gets, because people rewrite history all the time.
Yeah.
Here's one of the things he said. Training began with children who were taught to sit still. Well, we have that too, and enjoy it. Now the kids are so, TV technologies, they're so wired, it's hard for them to sit still. They were taught their origins of, they're taught to use their organs of smell to look where there was apparently nothing to see, which I like, because it's not just seeing with your eyes, but seeing with your, intuitive abilities, and to listen intently when all seemingly was quiet. A child who cannot sit still is a half-developed child. So he has all these goodies like that, to bring us back to what maybe it was like before technology and all this commotion. stress that people are living with. And that's what you get when you're hiking out there for 5 months. You get away from that stuff and tune in to what nature's really about, you know, to what planet could be like, you know.
That's right.
And I don't know what your views on nature. Do you have anything particular that came to you, or any perceptions about nature itself and all that? For a more philosophical question, but how do you see nature?
Oh yeah.
How
Oh
do you
yeah.
see
One of the, sorry to cut you off there, but one of the things that I try to teach my students is to what you just said, to be aware of your surroundings. Now, not just from a safety point of view, or not just from a responder point of view or whatever, but to actively take in and absorb what you're busting your butt to see. I mean, you're climbing mountains and you're going up and down and you're working real hard, carrying a pack, and you're going so fast you can't really appreciate it.
That's
So
true.
I'll stop a lot, and because everybody's usually behind me, I force them. When I stop, then everybody stops, and it's like, okay, guys, we're just gonna take a break. We're gonna take a pack off break. And first of all, it's like, oh my God, I'm taking my pack off and sitting down. I mean, are you serious? You know, I'm supposed to be go, go, go. And a lot of these hikers that want to do the PCT, for example, they're geared into thinking 20-mile days. And I'm thinking, well, no, let's dial it back, because if you average the whole trail, it's a whole lot less than that per day, you know, depending upon zeros and stuff like that. So, and I tell them, how are you going to know what the weather's doing or about to do if you don't pay attention to what's above you and look up? And they can't even see. This is awareness stuff. And they don't think look up. They're thinking look down so I don't trip. The trail 18 inches wide, got to behave myself. Don't look up. And when they look up, they can notice what kinds of clouds, how the clouds are changing, which way they're blowing, what that means. You teach them, and they can begin to learn how to forecast. If they sit still, they can listen to all manner of things, like you just said a second ago about listening. You can listen how active the forest is or the meadow is. And if it's making a lot of noise, that'll tell you one thing. And if it's not making any noise, that's like, holy cow, I better look around and see, maybe there's a predator around that everybody's quiet. And I don't know about, because I'm an arrogant human. And I think that I'm not vulnerable to anything. And so I try and teach everybody, use your senses and soak it all up. Smell, go up to a tree and smell it. Sit in the meadow and take in everything, the humidity, the wind, the smells. Take a camera that can take close-up pictures and get all the pictures of the flowers and everything. There's so much going on that if you're aware of it, then you don't get into so much trouble. And you can adjust layers of clothing. You can sense when there's a thunderhead building above you, because it's a freaking Hoover and it's sucking air, and suddenly now you got a lot of wind and it's cold because of that 30,000 foot cloud overhead. And then you can realize, oh, I better make camp, or I better not go above tree line because of lightning, you know, or hail is coming. But that's all because you're paying attention to winds and directions and temperatures and all that stuff. And the end result is developing a relationship with wilderness, with the spirit of wilderness, because it's constantly talking. It's constantly trying to teach you if you'll just listen.
That's very good. Very good. You familiar with Tom Brown Jr.?
Nope.
He's a primitive skills instructor. He's trained by an Apache elder. And when he was a boy, after a few years of studying with this Apache, they wanted a little walk and a 20-minute walk through the woods. And the grandfather, his name was grandfather, said, "What did you see?" And Tom, you know, said, "Well, I saw the raccoon behind the rock there, and the beetles in the tree, and the wind, and, you know, all this stuff." He said, "All this stuff in 20-minute walk, all these things." And he goes like, "And what did you see, grandfather?" Like he was real proud of himself. And grandfather goes on, it's like 6 hours later, grandfather's still talking about all the things that were happening in the forest, you know, during their 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
So and I agree with the, you know, I actually literally felt I was on a freeway on the because these young kids kept passing me up. I'm a slow hiker, and it was like a freeway. It's like, you know, like this, and it's so true. About slow down and take note. You know.
Yeah.
Okay, one more thing, and I have to go. I
Okay.
appreciate you being here, but I was curious if it's kind of a funny little thing, but in Northern California, there's these deer that follow you.
That's
And
right.
everybody comments on, oh, this deer is so friendly, but everybody gets that. Like they follow you, they just stand there and stare at you. What's that about? What are these deer? Is a group of alien deers or something? Do you know anything about them?
Well, not the following, but
Yeah.
I will say that it's very common for marmots and deer to seek out salt. And so they may smell it on you. And so
Yeah.
they're intrigued, perhaps. I know I woke up one morning in Northern California, cowboy camping again, and I had two deer sniffing my nose and smelling my face. And one of them ran off with a whole bunch of bread I had because I had just been resupplied. And you know, I've had a marmot come up to me while I was on camera teaching in the High Sierra. I don't remember what I was teaching about. I was on snow, and the marmot started chewing my boots because he wanted the salt.
Yeah.
And numerous hikers will tell you their handles on their hiking poles are prime targets because there's so much salt collected there that the deer will haul off with them or chew the cork right off of them or whatever.
Right.
So, you know, I think if this, maybe they're intrigued. I don't know so much if they're curious, but certainly I think that they can maybe smell the salt. I don't know anything else.
They were following us too. I know that. That was very interesting. But anyway, thank you so much for being on, Ned. It's just a pleasure knowing you, and it's a pleasure to know you. We'll keep in touch because you're doing good things for the planet. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So are you. I've seen your posts, and I appreciate all you're doing too.
We do what we can.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Ciao. I'll send you the link when I'm done with it. Probably.
Okay. Very good. Thanks.
Bye.
Like a bird on a tree, I'm just sitting here. I got time, it's clear to see. From up here, the world seems small. We can sit together. It's so beautiful, you and me. We meant to be in the great outdoors, forever free. Sometimes you need to go and take a step back to see the truth around you. From a distance you can tell